what is the difference between div and divide. And generally, we have removed div. Previously, we used to have div for integer division. So if you're dividing, like 1 divided by 2, typically you will get answer as 0.5. But an integer division will give you 0 as the answer. And now we call it as integer division, int div. So if it's 1, so for example, you take 1 as the number object and dot div in div 2, and that should give you 0 because it's an integer division. We removed div because it is too confusing for people, and so we have divide to do it, and a pure divide will give you 0.5. And these are used internally. Most of the time you don't have to go and use it. But the reason we have it like this is because sometimes you may have something like a long integer or something, and you want to divide it by another long integer or something like that. So that's when all these become useful. So as far as you're concerned, you generally don't use div and divide explicitly. Yeah, that's about it. The other question was, so there is something called CUDR, and all the member functions actually are in lowercase, all the array member functions. So typically we should write it like that. So when you have a list of something like 1 to 100, so if you say head, that will give you the first element of it. Or if you set first, it'll give you the first element but as an array, and that's the difference. So if you want the actual element itself, you would say first element. If you went and looked at the code here, A is this set of array, right? This 100 numbers there. But if you said A first, if you said like this, now B is going to be actually, it's going to be a number. It's not an array. I'm sorry, it's an array. B is now an array because he said first. But if you said first element, it's going to give you the actual number. And that's the difference. The other one was an array, and if you did first element, it'll give you just the element. What's the difference between last and last element? It's the same thing. If you did last, it'll give you the last element as an array. And you could say like last 2 or something, so it'll give you last 2 elements. So in both those cases, B is an array, right? Because he said, give me last. If you just said last, it'll give you B as a single element array. But the difference is you can say, and I want last 12 of them. So it'll give you 12 of them as an array, right? But in some case, you don't expect the last element as an array. You just want the last element. So you would do, B dot last element. And now B will be just number 100. So that's the difference between last and last element. And likewise, head and first element.